Zara Olson nearly dropped the cake box when she saw who walked through the door, 6-foot-something, tailored suit, jaw carved by the gods and eyes like winter storms. "What the hell is he doing here?" she muttered under her breath, clutching the bakery box like it could protect her. "Zara. You're a saint," her best friend, Mia, called from across the room, completely unaware of the billionaire who had just strolled into her tiny Brooklyn apartment. "Did you bring the lemon raspberry like I asked?" Zara blinked, nodding slowly. Yeah, it's right here." Mia grinned and turned her attention back to the wine glasses, still oblivious to the man now standing just a few feet from Zara, inspecting the modest decorations like he belonged at black tie galas, not a cramped surprise party for a Brooklyn schoolteacher. Zara didn't need to ask who he was. Everyone in New York knew who Fletcher Langston was: billionaire, tech genius, owner of Langston Dynamics. He was the kind of man who appeared on magazine covers and once shut down Fifth Avenue just to throw a launch party on the roof of the Met. So yeah, he was a little out of place here. "You're not lost, are you?" Zara asked, setting the cake down and trying to keep her voice steady. Fletcher turned to her, and for a second, the noise of the party faded behind the weight of his stare. "I don't think so," he said, his voice low and smooth. "This is Mia Carter's party, right?" Zara nodded. "It is." "Then I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." That threw her off. She frowned. "You know Mia, sort of. My sister, Harper, teaches at the same school. She invited me." Zara tried to picture Harper, sweet, quiet, curly-haired Harper, and this man was her brother. "Right," she said slowly. "Makes sense." "What's your name?" he asked, stepping closer. Not in a creepy way, he didn't leer or loom, he just looked at her like she was the only one in the room. "Zara," his mouth tilted up. "Nice to meet you, Zara," she blinked. "You too." She turned quickly, busying herself with the cake and pretending she wasn't hyper-aware of his presence. The apartment was filling up fast now. Mia's friends, co-workers, her sister. Laughter floated through the air and someone turned up the music. Zara had spent a month planning this party. Mia had just finished her master's in early childhood education, and Zara wanted to do something special. She'd hand-painted the banners, made the playlist, even begged her cousin to come bartend for free. And now Fletcher freaking Langston was standing in the middle of it, somehow stealing all the air from the room. She didn't have time for that kind of distraction. She was wearing $30 sneakers and a dress she'd gotten on clearance. Her hair was in a ponytail. She hadn't even put on lip gloss. But that didn't stop Fletcher from watching her. An hour later, after Mia screamed with surprise and hugged everyone in sight, Zara found herself trapped near the kitchen with Fletcher again. "You planned all this?" he asked, sipping something that definitely wasn't cheap wine. He'd brought his own bottle. Of course he had. "Yeah," Zara said, arms crossed. "Mia's my best friend. She deserves something special." He nodded slowly. "You did a good job. It feels real, warm." She glanced at him. "Is that rare for you?" He gave a half shrug. "Rare enough to notice," she laughed before she could stop herself. "That is the most billionaire thing I've ever heard." He looked genuinely amused. "Guilty? Don't worry," she said. "I won't tell the tabloids you were spotted in a normal apartment eating off paper plates." He leaned in just a little closer. "You're funny." Zara's stomach did a little flip. She did not have time for this. She grabbed an extra plate and headed toward the cake, trying not to panic. After the candles were blown out and Mia was thoroughly embarrassed by everyone's toasts, Zara slipped onto the tiny balcony for air. The night was cool, the city buzzing below. She leaned against the railing, closing her eyes. "You always this good at throwing parties?" She jumped, turning to see Fletcher behind her holding 2 plastic champagne flutes. "I didn't know billionaires drank out of plastic." He handed her one. "We make exceptions for interesting women." She rolled her eyes but took the drink. "You really don't have to flirt with me. I'm not impressed by the money." "Good," he said, stepping beside her, "because I'm not impressed by people who are." She looked at him, really looked this time. Not just the tailored suit and expensive watch. His expression was open, searching. "You're different than I expected," she said softly. He looked at her, his eyes serious now. "So are you." They stood in silence for a moment, the city stretching out before them. "It's late," she said eventually. "You should go before someone realizes you're missing from whatever penthouse you live in." He didn't move. "I don't want to leave yet," she swallowed. "Why? Because you're the most interesting person I've met in a long time. And I don't think I want this night to end without asking if I can see you again." Zara stared at him, stunned. "You want to see me?" "I do," she hesitated. "I don't do casual." "Neither do I." She looked at the man who could have anyone in the city, probably had women throwing themselves at him daily, and somehow he was looking at her like she was the only thing he wanted. She took a slow breath. "Okay, one dinner. But only if it doesn't involve helicopters or private chefs," he smiled. "Deal." And just like that, everything changed. Zara adjusted the strap of her tote bag and stared at the restaurant's entrance like it might disappear if she blinked too fast. She wasn't sure what she'd expected when Fletcher said dinner, but it definitely hadn't included being dropped off by a driver outside a restaurant with no sign, nestled between a flower shop and a locksmith in Soho. The windows were tinted, the door matte black. No menu posted. No line of people waiting. Just a man in a dark vest standing at the door who opened it the moment she stepped forward. "I'm here you're expected," he said with a nod, holding the door open. Inside, the lighting was low, the air perfumed with jasmine and something citrusy she couldn't quite place. The host greeted her by name and led her past tables dressed in white linen, past flickering candles and hushed conversations. Then she saw him. Fletcher was already seated at a corner table, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, collar slightly open. He stood when he saw her, and for a moment she forgot how to walk. "You found it," he said, pulling out her chair. "I was worried the entrance might be too subtle." "You picked a restaurant with no name," she replied, settling into the seat. "It felt more like solving a riddle than going to dinner. I like to keep things interesting." She picked up the menu, no prices, of course. Nothing but ingredients listed in lowercase serif font. "What does golden beet essence with wild herb foam even taste like?" "Surprisingly good. But if you hate it, I'll take you somewhere else. We can leave right now." She studied him. "Are you always this accommodating?" "Only with people I'm trying to impress." The waiter arrived, and Fletcher rattled off a wine vintage she didn't recognize. Zara ordered the first dish that didn't sound like it required a translator and set the menu aside. "So," she said, glancing around. "How many people do you bring here?" "Only two before you. One was my CFO, the other was a chef from Paris who wanted to study the plating here." "Wow," she said, sipping her water. "Romantic," he chuckled. "I didn't say they were dates." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you always this hard to read?" "No. But I think I like that you're trying." Their food arrived, hers a delicate stack of roasted vegetables with some kind of edible flour, his a small square of meat drizzled with a deep red reduction. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments before she set her fork down. "I still don't get it," she said. "Get what? Why me? I'm not someone you usually run into at your events or fundraisers. I'm not a venture capitalist or a fashion editor." "That's exactly why," he said, not missing a beat. "You looked me in the eye at that party and didn't flinch. You didn't ask what I do or who I know. You didn't try to network. You just saw me." She tilted her head. "And that's rare," painfully. Zara leaned forward slightly. "You ever think maybe you're just not letting people see you?" He looked at her then, really looked. "All the time." A pause stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with something unspoken. She reached for her wine and took a careful sip. "Tell me something real," she said. "Something you don't say in interviews." He leaned back, considering her. "Then, when I was 10, my father sold my dog to a neighbor because he said I was getting too attached." Zara blinked. "You're kidding." "I wish I were." He said it was a lesson in detachment, that if I wanted to run a legacy company one day, I'd need discipline. She stared. "That's horrible." "It was," he said simply. "But I bought the dog back a week later with money I made reselling comic books. Hid him at my aunt's house until Dad left for a business trip, and then brought him home and told my mother everything. Her lips parted. What happened? My father didn't speak to me for a month, but my mother never let him near the dog again. She said if he wanted to teach lessons, he should start with compassion. Zara shook her head. That might be the most bizarre coming-of-age story I've ever heard, Fletcher laughed. It shaped me, probably more than any boardroom ever did. She studied him for a long moment. You're not what I expected. You keep saying that. Because you keep proving it true. The check was never brought. Instead, the waiter simply nodded at Fletcher as they stood, like some silent transaction had already passed between them. Outside, the night had turned cooler, the air crisp with late spring chill. There's a car, he offered, gesturing toward the sleek black vehicle parked at the curb. Actually, she said, pulling her coat tighter, I don't live far, I'd rather walk. He didn't hesitate. Then I'll walk with you, she gave him a look. A billionaire walking home through Soho at night, that's not exactly standard protocol, is it? I've never liked protocol. They started down the sidewalk. The streets were quieter now, a few shops still open, spilling warm light onto the pavement. She walked with her hands in her pockets, and Fletcher kept pace beside her, their strides matching without effort. Your life's curated, she said after a few moments. Like a museum exhibit, invitations only, vetted guests. No surprises. You're not wrong. So what happens when someone like me walks in and doesn't follow the script? He looked over at her, the corner of his mouth lifting. Everything gets more interesting. They reached her building, a narrow brownstone with a chipped gate and ivy climbing the railing. She stopped at the steps, turning to face him. This is me, I figured. She hesitated. Tonight was unexpected. That's the word of the week, apparently. She laughed, then quieted. I'm not looking for a fairy tale, neither am I. She studied him. If this is a game to you, it's not. She nodded slowly. Good night, Fletcher. Good night, Zara. He didn't lean in, he didn't push. Just waited until she slipped inside and closed the door behind her. Upstairs, she rested her back against the door, heart pounding. She didn't know what scared her more, that he liked her, or that she might be starting to like him back. Zara had no idea what to wear to a private art showing on the Upper West Side, especially one hosted in a penthouse instead of a gallery. She stood in her bedroom, staring at the single sleek dress she owned that wasn't tied to some past bridesmaid obligation. It was black, simple, and just formal enough not to look like she'd borrowed it from someone wealthier. She didn't know why she'd said yes. Maybe because something about Fletcher was impossible to shake, like a song that got stuck in her head and refused to leave. When the car pulled up outside her building, the driver greeted her by name without asking, opening the door to a sleek interior that smelled faintly of leather and cedar. No music, just the soft hum of the city outside. She expected Fletcher to be waiting inside the penthouse, possibly surrounded by people in suits and cocktail dresses murmuring about brushstrokes and improvements. Instead, when the elevator opened directly into the space, he was alone, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the skyline like it was a living thing. You came, he said, turning toward her with a small, real smile. You invited me, she replied, stepping in cautiously. I wasn't sure if this was a real event or just a line. Both, he said. The artists are real. The collectors are coming later, but I wanted you to see it first. She raised an eyebrow. You're giving me a private preview? I thought you might see things they won't. She glanced around. The walls were lined with pieces from unfamiliar names, bold, raw, and deeply emotional. Nothing about the collection screamed curated wealth. It felt personal. These don't look like the kind of painting someone buys to match a couch, she said. They're not. I found most of them at second-rate shows. Some were sent to me by artists who couldn't afford gallery fees. Zara turned back to him. You're not what people say. I hope not. They moved through the space slowly. She stopped at a piece that looked like a woman standing in the middle of a storm, her face obscured by smears of paint, her hands outstretched. I know how that feels, Zara murmured. He came to stand beside her. Tell me. She hesitated then, surprised he'd asked. There was a year after my mom died when I didn't know how to function. I'd get to work and forget how I'd gotten there. I'd go days without talking to anyone who wasn't a customer. I kept thinking if I stayed still enough, the grief would get bored and leave. He didn't respond with sympathy, just quiet understanding. And did it? No, she said, but I stopped waiting for it to. He nodded slowly. You carry it well. I don't try to carry it, she said. I just let it sit beside me. They walked on. Why this? She asked after a few minutes. With all your money and influence, why collect paintings from unknown artists? Because they're still hungry, he said. They're not painting for auctions or fame. They're painting because it's the only way they know how to survive. That sounds familiar, he glanced over. You paint? No, she said, but I bake, same impulse, I think. Creating something with your hands because the world doesn't make sense unless you do. Before he could respond, a soft chime sounded at the elevator. The others are arriving, he said. Come with me. She followed him up a staircase that spiraled toward a rooftop terrace. The city stretched out around them, glittering and endless. A few heaters radiated warmth near the seating area, and a small bar served drinks behind glass walls. Waitstaff floated silently. He led her to a corner where 2 chairs overlooked the skyline. We'll stay up here until you're ready, he said. You're not going to mingle? They're not why I hosted this. She sat down beside him. You're not like anyone I've met before. I could say the same. They sat in silence for a while, the city murmuring around them. Then his voice broke the quiet. When I was 23, I almost sold the company. Zara blinked, surprised. Langston Dynamics, he nodded. It was barely surviving. My investors wanted me out. I had an offer from a European firm that would have made me rich enough to disappear. But you didn't take it. No, he said. Because I realized if I sold it, I'd be selling every hour I'd spent sleeping on the floor of the office. Every night I'd gone without food to pay another developer. Every risk, every failure, I couldn't let someone else cash in on my scars. She looked at him with something new in her eyes. You built it yourself. I did. She studied his profile, the way the city lights caught the edge of his jaw. You're nothing like the stories. He turned toward her, closer now. Neither are you, she laughed softly. What stories have you heard about me? That you're the kind of woman who plans parties down to the second, who doesn't like being surprised, and who pretends she's not afraid of anything. Her smile faded. And you think that's not true? I think you're still figuring out what is. The silence thickened between them, not awkward charged. Then, softly he asked, Do I scare you? She hesitated, the wind tugging at a loose strand of hair. No. But how much I want to say yes to this does. He reached out, brushing that strand behind her ear. Then say yes anyway. She didn't move, didn't breathe. I don't want to be a footnote, she whispered. I don't want to be one of 100 women you've taken to view the skyline. There hasn't been anyone else like you, he said. And there won't be. Their eyes locked. The space between them narrowed, and then, finally, she leaned in. The kiss wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was deliberate, certain. A promise wrapped in quiet heat. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. You know this isn't going to be easy, she said. I'm not asking for easy, he murmured. I'm asking for real. Downstairs, voices echoed, champagne flutes clinked, and $1 million art collection waited to be admired. But on the rooftop, under a canopy of stars and doubt and wild, unexpected hope, Fletcher and Zara stayed exactly where they were. Rain streaked across the windows of Zara's bakery like brushed silver, soft and rhythmic against the glass. She was alone in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, hands dusted in flour. The scent of cardamom and dark chocolate filled the air, rich and grounding. Her mind, however, was far from grounded. It had been nearly 2 weeks since that night on Fletcher's rooftop. Since the kiss that unraveled everything she thought she understood about herself and what she wanted. They'd seen each other twice, since once for dinner at her place, where he insisted on helping her chop vegetables even though he clearly had no idea what he was doing. And once when he showed up unannounced with coffee from the cafe she'd once mentioned offhandedly. Each time felt like a deeper dive into something she hadn't meant to start but couldn't seem to stop. The bell above the front door rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. "You're closed," she called, not looking up. "I know," came Fletcher's voice. She turned and found him standing near the display case, hair damp from the rain, no umbrella in sight. He wore a navy wool coat, hands in his pockets, and an expression that made her pulse skip. "I thought you had a meeting uptown," she said, brushing her palms on a towel. "I moved it," he replied. "I needed to see you first." Zara raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" He stepped further inside. "I got an offer this morning from a Scandinavian tech firm. They want to buy a controlling stake in Langston Dynamics." Her breath caught. "Are you considering it?" "I don't know. It came with conditions. If I took the deal, I'd have to step back from the company for a while, let their board lead the transition." She folded her arms. "Why would they want you out?" "Because they think I'm too involved, too emotionally attached. They want clean lines, predictable margins. And you?" "I built that company with my name on every server," he said, voice low. "But for the first time in years, I'm not sure if holding on tight is the right thing." Zara studied him. "You're thinking about walking away." "I'm thinking about what my life looks like if I do." He met her eyes. "And who I want in it." She froze. "Fletcher, I'm not trying to scare you," he said quickly, "but I meant it that night. I don't want anything halfway. And I can't stop thinking about what comes next if I make space for something real." Zara's throat tightened. "You think you can just step out of that world and live on takeout and late hours, and I don't want to step out of it," he interrupted. "I want to build something with someone who doesn't care about the spotlight, someone who challenges me when I'm wrong, someone whose hands smell like cinnamon and whose eyes never look past me." Her fingers tightened around the towel. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to be with you," Fletcher said. "And not in passing, not for a season. I want all of it, the hard parts, the long days, the mornings when you don't want to talk and the nights when you let me in anyway." Zara didn't move. "I came here because I need to know," he said quietly, "if you want that too." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the rain picked up, tapping faster against the windows. Zara finally exhaled. "I didn't want this, not because I don't feel it. I do. God, I do. But because I didn't know if I could survive it if it broke." He took a step closer. "Then let's not let it break." "How can you be so sure?" "I'm not," he said honestly. "But I've lived my whole life betting on logic. You're the first thing I've ever wanted that didn't come from a strategy, and that makes it the only thing worth risking everything for." She closed the distance between them slowly, as if her body moved before her mind could catch up. "If we do this," she said, voice trembling, "you have to promise me something. Name it. You don't get to disappear when it gets messy. We face it together." Fletcher reached out, gently taking her flour-dusted hand. "I promise." She nodded, eyes stinging. Then came the knock at the door. Zara blinked. "It's Sunday, we're closed." Fletcher turned, frowning. "Should I get it?" Before she could answer, the door opened and there stood Mia, holding a bouquet of sunflowers and a stack of letters. "I didn't know where else to go," Mia said breathlessly. "You need to see this." Zara stepped forward, confused. "What is it?" Mia handed her the top envelope. "It came this morning, from the mayor's office." Fletcher's brows lifted. "The mayor?" Zara opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the page, widening with every line. "They're awarding the bakery a city grant," she whispered, "to expand. They said someone nominated me for my work during the pandemic, helping feed hospital staff." Mia looked at her. "Did you know?" Zara shook her head. Fletcher stayed quiet, but his expression said everything. "You did this?" she asked, turning toward him. He didn't deny it. "I made a few calls," he said. "You never ask for anything. I figured it was time someone gave back." Zara stepped forward, overwhelmed. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," he said. "Not for attention, not to impress you. But because this place is part of you, and I'm in love with every part of you." The words hung in the air, solid and unmistakable. Mia quietly backed toward the door, mouthing something along the lines of "I'll call you later" before slipping out. Zara stared at him, heart thudding. "You love me?" she asked. "I do," he said. I didn't mean to, but you walked into my life and wrecked every plan I had, and I've never been more grateful." She stepped into his arms, the scent of rain and sugar and something unshakably safe wrapping around her. "I love you too," she said. "Even when it terrifies me." He kissed her, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that wrote endings and beginnings all at once. Later that month, the bakery's expansion was announced alongside a gala to honor local small businesses. Zara stood at Fletcher's side, hand in hand, no longer afraid of the cameras or the whispers. Because this wasn't a story of a woman who stumbled into wealth, it was one of a love that couldn't be bought, only built. And when he surprised her with a rooftop dinner lit by 100 candles and a single velvet box, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, "to everything." And this time nothing in her hesitated, not her heart, not her future, because sometimes the best kind of love shows up with no warning. And never leaves. Zara adjusted the tiny boutonniere on Fletcher's lapel with trembling fingers, her heart thudding in a rhythm she couldn't control. The rooftop had been transformed again, but this time, not into an art showcase or a private dinner. This time, it had been turned into a wedding garden. A string quartet played softly behind her, the warm golden glow of fairy lights threading through the trellises overhead. White orchids spilled from every surface, delicate and alive, their scent clinging to the early evening breeze. The city twinkled far below, but up here, everything felt still. "You okay?" Fletcher asked, his voice low, reassuring. "I haven't worn heels in over a year, and I think I forgot how to breathe," she whispered back, then looked up at him. "But yeah. I'm okay." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You're more than okay, you're beautiful, and you're mine," she exhaled, her nerves softening under the warmth of his gaze. "I still can't believe we planned all this in 3 weeks. You once organized an entire charity gala in 72 hours. This was nothing compared to that." "Yeah, but that didn't involve marrying a billionaire." "No," he said, threading their fingers together. "Just the man who happens to be one." Their efficient, a close friend of Fletcher's mother, cleared her throat with a smile. "Whenever you're ready." They hadn't invited hundreds of people. Just a few close friends, Fletcher's sister Mia, and a handful of people who had supported them quietly along the way. There were no media outlets, no press releases. Just vows, whispered soft and sure, and eyes that didn't wander. "I promise to never let the world come between us," Fletcher said, voice steady. "To listen when it's hard, to speak when it matters, and to hold you when there's nothing left to say. I promise to love you in the quiet moments as fiercely as I love you now." Zara's eyes shimmered. "I promise to never let fear decide for me, to show up, even when I'm scared. To believe in us when it would be easier to run, and to love you not for who the world says you are, but for who you are when no one's looking." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher didn't wait. He pulled her into him, kissing her with the kind of certainty that made cheers erupt behind them. Later, in the soft chaos of clinking glasses and impromptu speeches, Zara wandered toward the edge of the rooftop garden, heels dangling from her fingers. She stood barefoot against the railing, watching the lights of the city blink like scattered stars. "You disappeared," Fletcher said behind her, "needed a minute to catch up with everything in my head." He stepped behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. "Anything I can help with?" She leaned back into him. "I was thinking about my mom. She would have loved this. She would have grilled you for hours and then tried to pretend she wasn't impressed when you flew us to Italy for cannoli." "That offer still stands," he said. "We can leave tomorrow." She turned to face him. "Let's stay here for a while, just us. That's all I've ever wanted." They danced barefoot beneath the lights, long after the music had faded, long after the staff had quietly disappeared. In the quiet, with only the hum of the city and the whisper of her dress brushing across the stone, it didn't feel like a wedding or a fairy tale. It felt like the beginning of something true. Months passed. The bakery's expansion opened to a line that stretched around the corner. Zara kept the original counter intact, refusing to change what had made it feel like home. But she hired new staff, added space for community events, and started a baking mentorship program for local teens. Fletcher kept his promise. He didn't sell the company. Instead, he restructured it, stepping back just enough to let his executive team run day-to-day operations, while he focused on innovation and, more importantly, balance. They moved into a brownstone near the bakery, something with character, uneven floors, a cherry tree in the backyard. Fletcher insisted on learning how to make challah from scratch. Zara watched him burn the first 3 batches and then declared him a wildly attractive disaster. They traveled, sometimes quietly without announcements, a week in Kyoto, a weekend in Vermont. Always returning home with new spices, old books, and stories they never posted online. One evening, nearly a year after their wedding, Zara found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, flour on his wrist. He was attempting pastry again, brow furrowed in concentration, tongue caught slightly between his teeth. "You're getting better," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "I had a good teacher." She walked to him, slid her arms around his waist. "You think we'll ever get used to this? What happiness! No, the quiet, the knowing someone's always here." He turned in her arms. "Maybe we don't have to get used to it. Maybe we just keep choosing it." She kissed him, slow and sure, the way she always did when the world outside tried to slip through the cracks. "I like that answer." A month later, she surprised him with a tiny pair of booties tucked inside a bakery box. He opened it slowly, confusion giving way to stunned silence. "Seriously?" he asked, eyes wide. She nodded. "We're having a baby." He dropped to his knees, both hands on her hips, forehead pressed to her stomach. "You and me and a little storm," he whispered. They named her Leela. She had Zara's eyes and Fletcher's stubbornness. On the night of her first birthday, the 3 of them danced barefoot in the kitchen, music low, cake crumbs on the floor. And in that moment, with a child between them, flour on the counters, and love tucked into every corner, Zara knew she hadn't fallen into a different life. She'd built it. Every heartbeat, every risk, every leap into the unknown had brought her here. Not to a fairy tale, to something real. Something forever.